Hi guys, just giving it a minute for people to join. I can see the numbers going up, so thank you. Just give it 10 or so seconds. I can still see the numbers going up. Make sure my own phones are on silent. Right. Right, guys, thank you and welcome to our 6th AST virtual event. I think we're getting quite used to these now, aren't we? So for those of you who haven't sort of watched any of the others or certainly watched live, there's a few ways you can get involved. So you can ask a question through the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of either your laptop or your iPad or phone. When I say bottom of the screen, not bottom of the, don't turn the iPad upside down. But better than that, you can obviously raise your hand. There's a raise your hand feature, and I'll kind of bring you in, and we much prefer that because it's always nice to have interaction, and it just gives us a bit of a breather as well. Feel free to tweet things out. You can use a hashtag AST event if you're watching live. Obviously, if we do say please don't tweet this, then please obviously respect the rules. But yeah, apart from that, I think you know all the rules. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There's just a few little bits and bobs to kind of sort of go through. We've done the house rules. So as I said, this is kind of our 6th event. And you know, we feel they've gone really well. We've certainly enjoyed them. I think we've had over sort of about 200 kind of positive messages on the back of them. So that's been really nice. We've also donated about £2,000 for charity as well. A lot of our speakers, we've kind of, you know, agreed with them that if there's a charity they support, we'll donate to them or certainly to the foundation and stuff like that. So these events have kind of done really well in that way as well. So that's obviously really good. We've had a lot of new members join us as well. So if you are a new member, then obviously welcome. Really, really pleased to have you, and obviously welcome to the trust. I think what's interesting as well is we've got now we've got members from about 20 sort of other countries as well. So it's not just the United Kingdom, it's kind of global. So that's really positive for us as well. So we're really happy with that. And obviously overseas members can get involved now, just like anyone else. This will probably be our last virtual event for a little while, certainly in this series. Obviously, with the football starting in a few days, you kind of won't need us for a little while. We've got obviously football on most days, so we want everyone to enjoy the football. But we'll certainly look to do something sort of end of the season and stuff like that. We've had a lot of members kind of email us as well, just to tell us that these actually work really well for them, because coming to central London's quite tough. So we'll obviously bear that in mind as well. And I'm sure we'll always have a kind of Zoom aspect to the meeting, so people can kind of get involved and stuff. Just a quick reminder that these obviously are exclusively for AST members. So please try and sort of refrain from kind of forwarding them on and stuff. I think some people might have done them innocently, and that happens. And if you're not a member but you have managed to get on today through something like that, don't worry. Obviously, just enjoy it. But I do encourage you to obviously become members, and even all of you that are members, you know, if you do have kind of Arsenal supporting friends, then, you know, please do let them know, get involved, join the AST. Obviously, we're all stronger kind of together. And, you know, I think the kind of survey we did a few weeks ago around the kind of things that the club will be doing and stuff, you know, that kind of shown. We got some, as Chloe mentioned last week, we got some really positive feedback from the Premier League about kind of the way we've engaged all our members. And we actually had a meeting with Arsenal today as well. So we got to put those kind of ideas forward and things like that. So I think that's kind of the what I had to kind of cover. There are a few bits, but I think I know you're sort of not here to to listen to me. So I want to bring Alan Smith to screen. Smudge, welcome. Just got
there we go. Thank you.
There we go. That was the bit you were stressed about, wasn't it? Just getting there.
No, we're there. We're okay. We're okay.
How are you? How's the lockdown been? How's, it's been a weird time. Obviously, you were probably preparing for games and preparing for the run-in and everything stopped. But I mean, how's it been for you professionally and personally?
Well, professionally, it's obviously been weird. I've been involved in football all my working life, and before that, and most weekends I've been thinking about football, going to grounds. I mean, it's the same for supporters, but personally, it hasn't been too bad. My two daughters, who normally live in London, they came back for the lockdown, and we've all been together, so it's been nice to be with them. The weather's been great, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I think just certain days you get a little bit down, don't you? And you think about the situation worldwide as much as anything. But hopefully there's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and the start of football doesn't harm at all.
Yeah, I know. We're really kind of looking forward to that. I mean, if I take you back to sort of March and when the kind of football season, it was obviously the Mikel Arteta news that really stopped the season.
Yeah.
Arsenal were preparing for a game away to Brighton, and it suddenly stopped. And what was your feelings then and stuff like? What's kind of going through your head? Did you sort of expect it to be this long, or did you think it would just be a short break? What was the view?
Yeah, I don't think any of us really knew what to expect, did we? When the news of Arteta came through, we all thought, well, these games at the weekend aren't going to go ahead, and they probably won't go ahead for the next few weeks. But I mean, 3 months, I don't think anybody could really envisage that. I mean, it's been just such a testing time for all football clubs, and it's the lower league clubs that my heart really bleeds for. Hopefully they will be able to hang on and come back, but you read all the time that so many could easily go out of business. The Premier League ones, they're big enough to look after themselves, it seems, but this could be a momentous, a catastrophic time for those smaller clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, obviously thinking about kind of the Arsenal and obviously the Premier League, I mean, football's now starting. What's kind of, how's it been for you? How's been that gradual introduction back? What kind of, how are you feeling about getting, because it's different for you as well. It's not the same game it was 3 months ago. What are Sky Sports doing, and how do you feel about all that?
Yeah, we've had a few Zoom calls, all the commentators, presenters, producers, directors. We've had some couple of chats about protocol as much as anything else, what we do when we go into the ground, where we go. So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot to get your head around, really, because it's going to be so different to normal. I mean, we're going to get to the ground no more than maybe an hour and a half before, whereas before it was about 3 hours, 3.5. You'd go in and have a chat with whoever. Now you'll get in there, have your temperature taken, and as long as you're okay, you'll just go straight to your position. I will, with my commentator, sit there with my little Tupperware box of sandwiches. There's no catering on site. Have your sandwich, get your commentary. I think we've all got our own microphones as well, we'll take home with us. Okay. But yeah, the 90 minutes is going to be different. I did do the England-Croatia game last year with Martin Tyler over there, and that was a bit different. There was no noise at all really in the stadium. All you can hear were the players. I think for the viewer at home, it will be a bit different if they use the EA Sports facility for crowd noise, which I think a lot of people will, perhaps. Yeah. But for us, it will be different because you've just got to make sure you lift your voice. Because normally you're trying to talk over the effects in your cans. Now there's going to be silence, so you just got to make sure you lend the occasion enough drama.
Yeah. So what Alan was talking about in terms of the EA Sports thing is fans will get the chance to choose if they want a kind of sort of artificial sound or if they want the actual sound. And if you watched any of the German football over the last few weeks, there's been artificial sound which has made it a lot better. And don't know if you saw Spanish football as well, Alan, but they had kind of artificial sort of people on the seats and stuff like that. So it looked like the stands were full and the noise, and it made a huge difference. I think it's it's probably fine if you're watching your own team because you're so engrossed. But if you're watching two other teams, mid-table teams potentially, Arsenal are mid-table, but two other mid-table teams, then it's probably you need that little bit of sound and stuff like that. I think.
No, I think so. And dressing the lower tiers, as you say, I think that will be helpful rather than just looking at empty seats, and maybe it'll kind of swallow up a bit of the echoey effects as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something we've kind of learned from Germany, who were very much the sort of experiment. And we got confirmed today with Arsenal that there's going to be a wrap around the Emirates. So there's going to be kind of, things from the Premier League, but majority of, I think 65% is just Arsenal stuff. So it will look like Arsenal, which is good. I mean, thinking about sort of your Sky Sports things, how many people from Sky Sports would there be ordinarily at a game, and how many will there be now, just for a feel of?
Well, I couldn't give you numbers. I mean, obviously, you'd have the studio. We're still going to have all the cameramen.
Yeah.
There's not going to be so many technicians around, sound engineers and what have you. The trucks aren't going. Although the trucks are going to be there on Wednesday, the production trucks, but. Normally they'll just do it back from base at Sky, so it's a big operation. But as it is, there's me, there's the co-commentator. We've got about I don't know how many 20-odd cameramen around the ground, a reporter. So it's a skeleton crew really. They're trying to keep it to the minimum.
Do you think? I mean, you talked about the England game, and did you feel it was different as well? Because I think naturally, without knowing it, when you commentate, there is a stopping kind of the game, and the cameras pan to the crowd. There's always something to say. There's always something to talk about. You'll probably lose about 10% of what you would normally talk about, and you kind of have to feel that a little bit. Like, does that got into your mind, or is that just you think that will just naturally kind of?
No, I think it'll probably be strange at the start. It'll be maybe a bit more harder work. Especially if it's not a good game. But I suppose in the first match, you're going to be just talking about the situation, aren't you, as much as the match that's going on in front of you. But when we get used to it, hopefully, and the players get used to it, as I think they will after one or two games. I played behind a closed doors game for Leicester back in the 80s. And I think as you get into the match, you kind of forget about it. At times, it's only when play stops and there's no fans here. But you're concentrating so much during a game that I think that intensity will gradually rise to something like it normally is with fans. But no, from our point of view, it will be something to get a grip of. It's a challenge.
Yeah. And I mean, we often talk about home advantage, and obviously at the moment we've seen in Germany where it's quite results have been quite mixed and things like that. I mean, I guess as a player, how do you think, does it now, put it this way, have Arsenal got more of a chance this Wednesday at City, just thinking maybe home advantage isn't there and, the City roar and stuff like that? Do you think it will sort of help Arsenal? Because we're playing 5 away games, obviously, initially.
Yeah, I think so. I think it should do, in theory. And as you say, those Bundesliga results probably bears that out. Some players get affected by a crowd. They might not think they do, but subconsciously, you go and take a throw in and somebody's shouting abuse at you and it can affect your game. So Arsenal's away form over the last few years hasn't been what you would like it to be. And also, if they can get a result at Man City, if they can get a win, of course, what that does for the confidence, they can use that as a springboard and who knows where it can take the boys. But a lot will depend, I think, on individuals, how they approach the match, how they've been in lockdown, psychologically, as much as anything. Can they bring something approaching their best game to Wednesday night? It's the side and the individuals, I think, that can switch it on the quickest, really, has got an advantage.
And I guess there's that kind of saying that, some players are great on the training field, and then sometimes matches they just get impacted by crowd and fans, and actually it could be an advantage for some. Because I mean, with Arsenal especially, we have felt the pressure in big games and things like that, so potentially it could help, maybe being a little bit too positive.
Yeah, Mikel Arteta came on the football show last week that I was on, and he was hoping it could be a slight advantage or level the playing field a little bit. I think it will, and hopefully Arsenal can. It's going to be fascinating the team he picked as well, isn't it? Now he's got more or less everyone available, hasn't he? I think.
Yeah.
People like Rob Holding back in the fray.
Yeah.
And,
not sure if Torreira's completely fit, ready to play.
No.
But yeah, apart from that, everyone should.
What that back four look like? He's had a few changes in now, hasn't he? So you want to try and build something fairly quickly, get a bit of stability in there. So that'll be interesting.
Absolutely. Just read a few comments, and I know a couple of people had some issues logging in initially, but we've sort of got about 130, 140 people, so I think those issues are okay now. But just a reminder, if you've got questions, please do raise your hand. You might have missed that bit at the start. Raise your hand and I'll bring you in. We want lots of questions, lots of interaction. I've just seen one pop up, which I'll bring you in a second, David. And also, if you're too shy to speak, obviously you can use the Q&A function. We've also got Glenn's in the back, so if you have got a question about fan share or anything like that, please do ask through the Q&A function. And Nigel's also in the back end, so if you do have questions about the finances and anything sort of what Nigel's been covering over the last kind of 4 or 5 weeks, then obviously feel free to ask. So I'll come to you in a second, David. I mean, obviously games will kind of start quite quickly. We play Wednesday, then Saturday, then Tuesday, then, there'll be there is a lot of games, How will that sort of impact the squad, do you think? And thinking about your sort of playing days as well, they haven't had a proper pre-season, but they were training at home, but they've had a couple of behind closed doors games. But how do you think from a player point of view? And do you think we'll see quite a bit of rotation, certainly initially?
Well, the 5 subs rule is going to help, isn't it? I don't know how much rotation from game to game we'll see. If you're winning matches, I think Arteta would maybe be reluctant to change things about if he doesn't have to. But the 5 sub rule will be interesting. You can only use it on 3 separate occasions. But half time as well. And you're right. The bigger clubs with bigger squads, better players should have an advantage in that regard. But again, I said to Arteta last week, you don't want to use too many subs and then you lose your rhythm, your pattern in the way that you do with, say, England friendlies, don't you? There's about 7 subs come on at half time and the game just disappears really in terms of its rhythm. So that's a new skill for the coaches really to master. But Arsenal have got a good squad. Obviously, it's not as good as the boys at the very top of the Premier League, but if it's used right, it could be an advantage. But I think physically, the lads aren't going to be 100%. Of course, they're not. Mentally as well, as I said, it's going to take a little bit of time to hit the straps, perhaps, to get a grip of the situation for them all.
Yeah, we had Colin and Gary Lewin on last week, and they were saying how important those even 2 behind the closed doors friendlies were. Just there's nothing like a bit of match practice. You can train as much as you want, but even if it was just Brentford and Charlton, it was still that kind of will just give them that extra edge, hopefully. I'm going to bring David in. David, you will be able to speak. Oh, unfortunately, David, you won't be able to speak. Unfortunately, you're using an old version of Zoom. So if you want to put your question in the Q&A, we'll obviously get it answered then. You put your hand down. So, yeah, cool. So, I mean, thinking about Arsenal now, I mean, we were, ninth or so, about, 7, 8 points behind the top 4. Obviously, we've got a game in hand, but obviously that game is Man City. It's quite a tough one. How do you think Arsenal will fare up, and how do you think they'll do in the next kind of 2 months?
Well, it's such a difficult one to predict, isn't it? Football's, unpredictable as it is, but this is unprecedented. And I go back to that theme about how teams, how individuals can cope. I mean, Arteta, I think we all felt he was making strides. He was trying to get his ideas across, and it's not easy to do that midstream in the middle of a season. He'll be glad to try and get a pre-season under his belt as much as the players' belts to get his ideas across more. But there does seem a little bit more purpose to the side. Everybody knows what their individual jobs are. So, you know, hopefully he can pick up and continue to improve. I'm sure he'd love to bring in a few signings. But as we all know, I don't think Arsenal got too much money to do that. The Aubameyang is another big issue, isn't it? Hopefully he can stay at the club, but because it's so practically impossible to get like for like when it comes to a goal scorer like that. But I really rate Arteta. I was a big advocate of him getting the job in the first place, and I think he's only going to get better as a manager. We forget he's only been in that job a few months, so he's learning all the time as well. But I think the team, the club's in the right hands.
Just a quick note that people are using the chat feature. If you could use the Q&A, that would be great, and we can get your questions asked. I mean, on Mikel Arteta, that was one of my questions sort of further down my notes. But obviously, there was a lot of talk about player cuts and a lot of clubs had deferrals and stuff like that. And I think Arteta was seen as kind of quite a key man in that bridge between kind of club execs and the players. I mean, how do you think generally Arsenal handled that whole kind of sort of player cuts? And I guess as a player as well, this is a unique insight. As a player, if you were in that situation, how do you think you would have felt? I know it was a little bit different when you were playing, and the amount of money we're talking now is just out this world. But generally, what were your feelings when you kind of saw the story unfold, and how would you have kind of handled it, maybe?
there aren't many clubs that they've managed to get the players to agree to a wage cut. There's a couple more now. I think Everton,
there's a few
Bournemouth,
deferrals, but cuts have been very rare. Yeah.
I mean, you can understand the players. There'll be a bit of cynicism there. They see, their own club or others spending 50, 60 million on players, and they're thinking, well, do you really need us to cut our wages? And I think it's a good point you make about, I think maybe the hold that Arteta's got over the squad at the moment, the respect that he carries, the authority that he's got, that they were willing to listen to him. I don't know how I would have reacted until you're in that situation. It's difficult to tell. A lot depends on the manager and maybe the captain as well at the time, whether you listen to him. So, fair play to the Arsenal boys. Obviously not everybody did agree to a cut, but a lot did. Listen, let's hope that leaves the club in a good position financially.
Absolutely. I've just heard from David. His question was more about kind of, do you think we might see some players who, I'm just reading it from my other screen, but players that have been visibly affected by both kind of positive and negative crowd interaction? So the Mustafi, Xhakas, even Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Mesut Ozil even, when they get, if they get a little bit of criticism and it does sometimes impact them, do you think you'll actually see some players really excel in this format because actually they might be a bit more free? Yeah,
I think so. You mentioned it earlier. Some players look world beaters in training, and then 50,000 fans are there, and all of a sudden they go into the shell. Depends on the personalities, but it might be that some shine and others that feed off a crowd. You might call them big match players that respond to that pressure. Maybe their game could go down 5%. Who knows? It's going to be fascinating to see how that kind of thing does pan out in the next few weeks.
And I mean, with the sort of lack, just thinking of you as a player, and I know you said you played a game behind closed doors, but that lack of noise, that lack of atmosphere, that lack of fact, you can hear probably everyone shouting, you can hear your manager, you can hear backroom staff. I mean, will motivation sometimes be a factor, or do you think actually they're so ready to go, they'll be fine? But do you think there is a lack of motivation there a little bit for certain players?
Well, I think as time goes on, the new normal is a phrase that we hear a lot now, and I think the players have got to get their heads around that anytime soon there aren't going to be fans in the stadium, so they've got to adjust the mindsets. And of course, there's a lot to play for still, isn't there, for the teams at the top and the bottom? Nobody wants to get relegated. Many players will have wage cuts included in the contracts down at the bottom. and many, you know, if you achieve Champions League football, many will get bonuses for that. I don't want to think it's all about money, but there's still a lot to play for them to go at. So I think two or three games in, hopefully, you know, they will settle and they won't be thinking about the surroundings so much. I think that'll probably be the case.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring in Paul for a question. So, Paul, you should be able to unmute yourself. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problems.
Welcome, Alan. Can I just say thank you for a wonderful contribution to the Arsenal, an absolute joy to watch you. I remember watching you when you were loaned back to Leicester. I think it was after March 1987, watched you at Oxford United. And it was so exciting as a very young man then I was, to see such a class act coming to the Arsenal. It was excellent and you didn't let us down. Now my question is, bringing us up to date, assuming everybody in the squad as it is fit, who would you choose as your two centre-backs?
Oh, there's a question, Paul. Yeah, I mean, I've always had a lot of time for Rob Holding. I think he can become a centre-half of substance. It's been difficult for him because he's played with a variety of partners, and that defence has often looked like, you know, it was four individual parts or five. They weren't a unit. I'd like to see him, you know, avoid injury and get a little run. Who that would be next to is a different matter. David Luiz, perhaps. I mean, the new boy played, didn't he, towards the end before it all finished? Murray.
Murray played the last two games, away to Portsmouth and at home to West Ham. 2 clean sheets as well.
But that's going to be a vital part of things, isn't it? I mean, Bernd Leno's looking like a top keeper these days, gaining in confidence all the time. So if they can get a couple of centre-halves that are in tandem, the full-backs, Kieran Tierney is another one, bit of an old-school left-back, you know, he's physically if he needs to be, but he's quick and very much in the Andy Robertson mould, I think. Bellerin, obviously, hopefully get him properly fit and in that team playing well. It'd be nice to get that kind of stability. There's a few choices at centre half, but as I say, you know, I do like Holding. I think he just needs that little bit of confidence of running games, and he could go from strength to strength.
Yeah, obviously he's come back from a long injury as well, so it's kind of, I guess, don't know if the time away from football would have helped him actually, because he would have had a bit more time, or if he would have preferred more games. It's hard to tell, isn't it? Could be either way. I'm going to bring in Lewis, who's just going to summarise a few of the questions we've had on the Q&A. So I think after this section, we'll go on to the more football stuff. So Lewis, is there anything kind of to cover off before we move on?
Yeah, hi, Alan. The first one is coming from, I presume, someone that may well have played Sunday League a few times and has realised that the language can be a little bit fruity, to say the least. And he's just said, do you think that the players' language could be an issue when we bear in mind there may well be not much noise to cover it up?
Certainly, if you choose the option not to have artificial sound, it will be,
Yeah. I mean, we've always had to apologise on Sky if any bad language does come across. There was talk of maybe just giving out a disclaimer at the start, because if you're doing it every time somebody swears, you're going to be just constantly apologising. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure how that will work. Maybe the players will be reminded. Try and keep the swearing down to a minimum if you possibly can. But you know, sometimes you don't know that you're swearing. It's just, I think Jordan Henderson in Croatia, he was the main culprit. He didn't stop. He was on at the ref and the Croatian bench the entire 90 minutes swearing along. But it's difficult because it's habit for a lot of players.
Yeah, well, that one came in from Kevin, so I should have said before. And this one from Clark. Alan, do you have a favourite moment as a player and as a pundit? And if you had any regret looking back in your career, do you have any that come to mind? But mainly we'll focus on the positives. Our favourite moment as a player and as a pundit.
If it is a certain night in '89, we will come on to that. But obviously, if it is, talk about it. But
well,
we will
it
come
is.
on
I
to
mean,
that.
it is. Nothing's going to compete with 26th of May 1989 when we won the league. That was just unbelievable. The further away you get, the more incredible it seems, really. So to be involved and to score and to have a part in the winning goal and to play well as well on the big stage when it really mattered, that was satisfying. So that's easily number one. The Cup Winners' Cup was another highlight. But that came at a time in my career towards the end when I wasn't scoring in the league, and bit of a miserable time for me. My confidence had suffered. So, that was a bit of a port in a storm. I just think, more generally, winning the league twice, obviously Anfield, and then a year later when we just lost the one game. And personally, I won Golden Boots on both occasions, and I never thought I'd do that. Like target man back to play. I always thought the poaching sorts would pick up that trophy. So that was nice. But I was just so lucky that I joined Arsenal at the right time, and I did experience so many highs. Just when we were becoming a team under George Graham. Absolutely.
And is there any? It must be so different. But as a pundit, is there any moments that you've witnessed that stand out?
Well, I've done a couple of Champions League finals. The one where when Barcelona beat Man United at Wembley, I think that was probably as good as Barcelona have ever been.
Fantastic.
They were just incredible. So to watch them at work that night was just such a pleasure. Done some really good games. I'm just trying to think of some at the Emirates. I never forget the Leicester game when Danny Welbeck scored that header towards the end. And you're thinking at that point, here we go, this could be the year. That's set up brilliantly. So it was such a letdown. They went to Man United the day after, the match after, was it? After the Leicester game?
We lost to Swansea about a week after something.
Swansea at home, I think. After we beat Leicester on Valentine's Day, and then we lost, a game.
But I remember getting very excited as a co-commentator when he scored that, and it was just such a disappointment afterwards. But the thing about the Emirates, there haven't been too many highs, have there? And that's maybe why fans don't feel such an affection for it as they did for Highbury.
Yeah. We lost him.
I think we...
Who, me?
Yeah. I think camera's just gone off.
Oh, don't know why.
Sorry, I might come back. Let's carry on. We can still hear you. Any more, Lewis?
Yeah, one quick one. We've all fallen in love with Saka, and we've also all seen that in the past we haven't been the best at getting fees for players. So this is a question that has come in from Kevin, and he said that if we don't manage to tie down Saka this summer, then in your professional opinion, do you think it would be the best idea to just kind of cancel our losses and try and sell him?
Well, you would hope that he can be persuaded to stay. From what I hear, he's a humble young man who wants to do well with a good attitude. And Arteta, I think he's the right kind of character that can persuade him to stay. We obviously don't want to continue this trend of losing people, losing talents for nothing. But and it would be a blow to use a young lad like that who's come through the ranks, wouldn't it? So yeah, hopefully he can hang about, because he's clearly a lad with a bright future. I'm just trying to click on things to try and get my camera to come back. I don't know why it's gone.
On Saka, the steward at the entrance that I go in, the Emirates, is actually with one of the police officers at the school that he went to, and he's saying for years. He was saying for years, since he was about 13, that he was going to be the greatest player we've had, and that he's such a lovely man as well. So it would be such a shame to lose him for so many reasons. Yeah, it would.
Alan, it might just be worth dropping off and coming back on. You've got the link, haven't you? That might sort it out. Yeah, don't worry.
I'll do that. Okay, I'll see you in a minute then. Thanks.
Cheers. It's not bad, is it? Six events, and this is the first technical hitch we've had. So I think we've done all right. We have got Arthur, Neil and Guy with hands up, so I will bring you guys in. If there are more questions, please do kind of raise your hand as well. I think it's always nice to bring people in. Gives me a there's one more. Gives me a breather as well. But we have got a few, so we'll move on to the more
No,
kind of
I'm still not there, am I?
still not there.
Hold on. No, hold on.
There
Yes,
you go.
There we
You're
go. There we
back.
go.
Brilliant. I mean, Lewis touched on sort of Saka, and obviously we touched on Aubameyang kind of earlier. I think Aubameyang, there were some quotes yesterday where he talked about kind of this is an important moment in his career. And I guess, you know, as a player, speaking kind of honestly, forget your Arsenal links and stuff, with his age, around that sort of 30-year-old mark, with kind of maybe the last big contracts. I mean, what do you think will happen with him? And can you understand it from a player's point of view? I mean, Arsenal are currently 9th. If we don't make it into the Champions League, he hasn't played Champions League football for us. I mean, sympathetic?
Yeah, because you want your players to be ambitious and to win things. You don't want them just to be thinking, if I can win a big fat contract here, that'll be enough for me. You know, that's what a lot of people feel about Mesut Ozil. He's got a fantastic contract and he's happy when, I'm sure he's not happy when he doesn't play, but he doesn't want to leave, likes London. Aubameyang knows he's a top player. He obviously knows through his agent who's interested in him, and there's not going to be any shortage of suitors either for somebody with that kind of goal return. So you can't blame the lad for that. And, you know, he sees his career ticking by. He is good enough to be in one of the top European sides. So, I mean, who knows how this is going to... Arteta said today, didn't he, that he was quite confident.
He was. He said that, yeah.
So that bodes well. That bodes well.
Mm.
I mean, money obviously comes into it. And he's clearly got an affection, a feeling for the club. And most lads come to a London club and they're happy, aren't they? Off the pitch, you lead a good life, and you don't get bothered too much in the way you might in other European cities. So that plays a part as well, his personal life. But you know, I'm sure Arteta's furiously trying to persuade him that he will be able to win things at Arsenal.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring in Arthur. So, Arthur, if you want to unmute yourself, welcome.
Hello.
Yeah, go for it.
Just about this lockdown, and do you think it has had a positive or negative effect on some clubs? For example, Watford were on a good run, and Tottenham, they've obviously benefited with their injuries, etc. Some clubs have benefited than others, do you think? Or
well, yeah, I mean, those that had gained a little bit of momentum, as you say, Watford, they'd beaten Liverpool, and they'd have wanted to kick on if they could have. Man United were going really well, weren't they, under Solskjaer? All of a sudden, we're thinking, oh, maybe he is the man for the job. And they were beginning to put things together. But Fernandes was playing for them, Bruno Fernandes, in the middle of the park. But they've got Pogba back now, so who knows how that's going to pan out. But that kind of momentum, you're almost starting from scratch again, aren't you? It's the first day of the season. Who can find their feet the quickest? Hopefully Arsenal can do it pretty swiftly.
Absolutely. Fire off a few more. Neil, allowing you to talk. Unmute yourself and welcome.
Thanks, Akil.
No
Alan, if you would have got the call from Harry for the Harry's Heroes, how do you think you would have done? Or would you have really enjoyed playing alongside Merce and the Romford Pele?
Well, Merce was my favourite strike partner, so I'd have certainly enjoyed that. And he's a pretty good player still, isn't he? He's still got the old magic in those feet. I love the show. Both series really made me laugh. And obviously there were some poignant moments as well with Merce and with Razor Ruddock. But as for taking part, as for playing, my ankles and my knees just would have said a big no to that, I'm afraid. I'd have had to have done the John Barnes role of assistant manager. But it was a great show. Really enjoyed it.
Well, the way they were all falling like flies, we would have had a bigger backroom staff than an actual playing squad at one stage. Question for Mark Brindle. Was there a particular player that you played with who was great in training and then didn't live up to potential on match days? And obviously we were talking about that topic, but was there anyone, you might not want to mention names, but...
No, you can't really, no.
Yeah.
Nobody, I don't think I'd want to out anybody in that regard. I mean, sometimes personally, you have a great week, Monday to Friday, then you think, here we go, and then it would just all go wrong on the Saturday. That's not because you're affected by just how it happens sometimes. I remember warming up on occasions and there was just no energy in your legs. You know, oh God, I'm going to have to really grit my teeth today and just get through it. And that's when you do earn your corn. If you can give the team a good 7 out of 10 when you're not feeling at it, at least you're contributing. Some players, obviously, they're getting stick off the fans and they're dreading next match day. And they tend to go in the shell. They don't want the ball. And that's when it gets really tough. You've got to find a way out of that if you possibly can.
And how do you help players through that? I'm just thinking, you know, at Arsenal, we obviously had the Granit Xhaka incident when, you know, he obviously had a really tough time. But he was having a tough time for probably a good 6 weeks before, and he was getting sarcastically cheered when he was getting taken off well before that incident. As players, how do you get your fellow kind of colleague through that? What kind of stuff can you do to help them?
Well, you feel for them for the start off because you kind of wince when, you know, some crowd are booing when your teammate receives the ball. You know, they're there, but for the grace of God. Can you still see me?
We can't, but it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it could be the Wi-Fi. It's all right, Karen.
So yeah, and so you do feel for them, and in the dressing room, you'll try and encourage them. You don't want to say too much, bring it to the fore too much. You just hope that they can find a way through it themselves. You'll encourage them on the pitch. I mean, by all accounts, Xhaka's a very popular member of the dressing room. And what the fans see to what the players see, they can be two different things. So hopefully he's come through that. Arteta has you know, he's picked him enough times, hasn't he? He obviously feels he's got something to offer. I don't know if that's the case in the long term, but it's never a nice thing when that happens. And I think any professional footballer would feel for somebody like that.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring in Guy for a question. Guy, unmute yourself. Welcome. Ask away.
Thanks, Akil. Hi, Alan. I was lucky enough to go to many games in 88, 89 or 17. And like you, I was up there at Anfield in that corner going, well, not like you, but I was up in the corner going mental in that last minute. But I think you're very much the unsung hero of that season. And it's easy to forget that you're top scorer and scored some very important last minute goals yourself. And I look back and remember a game against Southampton where you scored an equaliser in the 7th minute of injury time, I think, after we'd been 2-0 down. And I remember leaping around the North Bank and having a lot of room to jump around because so many people had left by then. And and then another last minute one against Derby just towards the end of the season when we thought, God, are we going to mess this up? And you managed to score one just to what seemed like a token effort at the end to bring the score to 2-1 defeat against Derby. But obviously every goal mattered so much that season. Do you look back and remember each one as fondly as that, or does the Anfield one just stick out so much more than the rest?
Yeah, there are certain goals you remember very fondly. I mean, that Southampton one, it was a header, wasn't it? And it was a good header for me. It was a bullet one into the far corner, and you know when you can get the winner right at the end, that means a lot. I remember I scored past David Seaman against QPR right at the death in that season, just a little toe poke. But the Norwich as well on the Good Friday, was it after the Hillsborough pause in fixtures, when John Lukic has punted it upfield and I've kind of swiveled and hit it home with my left foot. That was another favourite. But the ones that mean a lot, as you say, the Anfield game, that meant that was the most precious goal I could have ever scored. And those mean a lot when your team needs you, whether it's spectacular or tapping from a yard. They do mean so much.
I'm going to bring in Amanda, who I've got a funny feeling is going to ask the question on that very subject. So, Amanda, got about 20 seconds or so.
Hello. No, I'm not going to ask about 89, even though Alan will be shocked about that. Hi, Alan. Hope you're well.
Hi, Amanda. Okay.
Alan, I want to talk about Mikel Arteta. I'm really keen. I think he's a right fit for Arsenal. I know we can't say too much because obviously he's quite new in, but just before the lockdown happened, we started to get a little run together and it was really, really good. So my question is, what do you think he is the right fit for us? Do you think he can take us far? And also one other question that it keeps coming up, are we going to have any money for transfers, or is it going to be loans and swaps generally across the board? Because obviously we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, well, I do think, along with you, Amanda, that he's the right man for the job. I thought that at the start. I'd heard a lot about him through people at Man City. He looked and sounded like a man who'd got that natural authority, who could command a group of players, even though he hasn't been a manager before. So I was delighted when Arsenal went for him on, the second time around. As to how successful he can be, you're only as good as your players, aren't you? And he does need better players in certain positions, and that comes down to money in this day and age. In the short term, I think the club are going to have to be a bit creative and look at letting one go to bring one in, perhaps. It's not going to be easy because, by all accounts, they've spent a lot of the money on Nicolas Pepe and the like in advance. So I don't know. I don't know how successful he can be. That's the thing. I think he'll only be held back by the lack of funds, if that's how it turns out. I don't think his abilities as a manager, as a leader of men, will let him down. His abilities on the training ground, I think he's got everything necessary to be a top manager. The big question is whether he can do it at Arsenal with the tools that he's given.
Yeah, the AST have done a lot of work on the finances and stuff like that, and there is a massive impact. I think you're spot on in a lot of loan deals, swap deals, and I think people are going to be quite creative in the next window, or certainly the next couple of windows. So I think it's probably good if we've got an Arteta who is a bit of a coach, because I think that will be his main aim, to improve players, I think. A couple of questions here. One from Adam King. Who's the greatest player, club or country, you've ever played with?
Wow. Brian Robson was an amazing central midfielder. Played with him for England. You'd do training. He could do everything. Both feet. He could obviously tackle like a lion. Never stop running, and such a good finisher. We'd do crossing and shooting, and he'd be volleying, half volleying, both feet, finding the corner. He could head the ball. He was a tremendous player. I played with Paul Gascoigne when he was at his peak, really. So quick, over 5-10 yards, so strong. He would only lend you the ball. He didn't want you to have it for too long, play a little 1-2s. I played with him when he scored his first goal at Wembley. He was so chuffed. Such a, tragedy what happened to him in terms of injuries more than off the field stuff, and that slowed him down. So, yeah, I played with some great... obviously, the defenders at Arsenal, they're going to take some beating. That back four. And then I've played with Gary Lineker, obviously. I think Ian Wright was certainly the best finisher I've ever played with, one of the best I've seen. He was even better than Gary, I think. Just so instinctive, so natural. So I've been lucky. David Rocastle, Rocky... when he was younger, had everything. And again, an operation that went wrong, slowed him down, never quite the same player again. But when he was 19, 20, whatever, he was just majestic.
We had a question from Paul, actually, on when we signed Ian Wright. in the early 90s. I mean, did you feel you had to sort of adapt your game a little bit? Because he was kind of coming in as maybe the number one striker, and how did you kind of feel about that? And what did you do? Did you work on your game sort of and changing it slightly?
Well, no, when I heard we were buying him, I thought this was perfect, because I just thought, looking at him at Crystal Palace, I thought my game would gel with his perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. But it's funny in football, sometimes things don't work out as you imagine. And as it turned out, Ian was such an individual. He came into a team that was quite set in its movement and shape. We'd do shadow practice in the week at London Colney. So we virtually knew where we should run at any given time, or at least I did, if one of the fullbacks had it, whatever. So it was quite a kind of a formulated side and pattern. And then Ian came in and he just ripped that all up, really, in terms of he'd run across your line, he'd do things you weren't expecting, but he'd end up putting the ball in the net. So George Graham kind of gave up on that front, and it was hard to read him. So you kind of just let him get on with it and worked off his movement. So it was much different to how it had been with Merce and Kev Campbell, even Perry Groves, where we knew where each other was going to be, really.
Yeah. And there's a question, if you could take one player you had played with, this is from Zach, one of your old Arsenal teammates, and put them into the current Arsenal team, who would that be? I love questions like these because they're always hypothetical, aren't they? But they're quite fun.
What, put it into the present Arsenal team to make it better? Because I think yeah. Well, Tony Adams would be nice, wouldn't he? Tony would be nice at the back as a leader and a captain figure, top defender. Yeah. I mean, there's all manner. You can't really say. You could say Righty, but Aubameyang's a fantastic finisher. But I mean, Arsenal have got some good players, some good creative players at the moment. But as we've been saying for many years, it's that solidity at the back, that meanness that we've been pining for. So somebody like Tony, I think, would get down a treat.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a question, you mentioned Aubameyang there and also Saka. I mean, if the kind of contracts aren't signed, and we don't know exactly when the transfer window will be open, but we presume August, would you then cash in on them, or would you kind of let them play out the year
thinking potentially we could have a good year and then they would go on a free? Because obviously neither of them have signed contracts. Would you cash in on them? I think that was a question from Kevin Richer.
Well, yeah. If the player is determined to go, in Aubameyang's case, if he's determined to go, it's hard to keep hold of him and just say, okay, well, stay here for another season. You never quite know what their attitude will be like if he's missing out on a move to Real Madrid, whatever. So you've got to weigh it up. You've got to speak to the player, see where he's at, really. Some players will give it their all, even though they want to move. You've got to weigh that up with the financial situation, haven't you? Depending on the kind of bid that you get. A player with 12 months left on his contract, you get a bid of 40 million. It's difficult, isn't it? Especially a club in Arsenal's position, financial position. That's 40 million that could be well spent. But you're going to lose a player in Aubameyang. There's no easy answer. No easy answer at all.
It's hard to know what the value is on players as well. I don't think anyone really has a clue at the moment. I'm going to bring in Mush, who's asked a question. So if you unmute yourself, Mush, you should be able to speak. Welcome. Yeah, go for it.
Oh, hi, Alan. Thanks for having me on. And I remember as a kid watching you in '94 scoring that great goal in the Cup Winners' Cup final. I think I was about 7 or 8 at the time, so an absolute legend in my eyes.
Thank you.
The question I have for you is, I didn't watch '89. I think I was 3 years old at the time. But Arsenal won the league championship twice in 3 years, '89 and '91. And the '91 team obviously only lost 1 game. what are the underlying reasons, do you think, why Arsenal didn't go on to dominate post 91 and throughout the 90s, unlike someone like Manchester United who did so in the Premier League years?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the headlines after we'd won the league in 91, Mush, when it said Arsenal set to dominate for the next 10 years. And at that point, you didn't see a reason why that couldn't happen. We'd been together, well, we hadn't been together too long at that stage. Once it came to the mid-90s, you felt that it had got stale. Too many players listening to the same managers' team talks for too long. But we didn't turn the team over, the squad over, with enough quality. You know, George Graham will say there were reasons for that. He didn't have the money to spend. Whatever the reasons are, players were coming in who, you know, we could see that they just weren't good enough for Arsenal. They didn't come up to the standards we were used to, and it fell away. You know, we still had that back four, that back five with Dave Seaman. We could keep a clean sheet for fun, and we could nick a goal through Righty more often than not, and that's why we became a cup side. But for those of us that had won 2 league titles, it was so disappointing to become a cup side then, to not challenge at the top. And, you know, it gradually ground to a halt, and obviously the gaffer leaving the way he did. You look at Man City, you look at Liverpool, and you're thinking, wow, they're going to dominate for God knows how long now. But it doesn't always work like that, does it? A manager can leave and things can break up. So nothing's guaranteed.
Yeah. Lewis, questions from the floor? Any?
Following on to the Aubameyang chat, and if Aubameyang does end up leaving, and Lacazette's form recently hasn't really set the world alight. So, Alan, this comes in from Andrew. Do you think that Martinelli and Nketiah have what it takes to step into those roles?
Well, I mean, stepping into Aubameyang's shoes, that'd be asking too much for young lads. Both players have obviously got a lot of talent. Martinelli, particularly, has caught the eye with his ability to come in from the flank and play in the middle as well. He looks like a player that could do big things for Arsenal. And Nketiah, one of those goal scorers. Just hope he doesn't feel he's beyond the stage that he is, really, that he does knuckle down and work hard at his game. But it's so difficult to replace. I mean, Lacazette, you're right. His goal return has gradually dwindled, but maybe this break will do him good. And he can come back and show the form he did in his first season. But, you know, if you haven't got top strikers, a bit like top defenders, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's a delicate situation. But I think Martinelli particularly is one that you would have high hopes for.
Yeah, I love him personally. And again, on the sad topic of the possible Aubameyang departure, it would be, as George points out, another captain to leave just as they've been handed captaincy. And if that did happen, who would you think should be given it next if we're looking at someone to hopefully have it for the next 4 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, much depends on the makeup of the team, doesn't it? That's where you would want a dominant centre half, perhaps, to be the main man. You know, I think there's a lack of leaders in football in general. We've obviously had this committee and the 5 possible captains and all the rest of it that Unai Emery consulted with the squad about, which seemed a strange way of going about things. But nobody leaps off the page, really. So, you know, there's not a name really I could put forward as a natural. I mean, Bellerin he's a very mature boy, isn't he? He speaks well. Rob Holding, another I mentioned earlier, but you don't know if Holding, for instance, is going to be in the team. Yeah. It's a difficult one at Arsenal. It's a difficult one.
And then finally, this in from Nicholas, and he says that you played in teams that had an incredible mentality. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but how do you think Arteta can try and go about instilling that kind of winning mentality in this group of players?
Yeah, I mean, it's in him, isn't it? I think that can be infectious, that attitude. But, you know, he's got to hope that players can cope with defeats, because there will be some defeats along the way, in the way that there wasn't at Man City, for instance. But it's not a quick fix. It's something that only comes with results, really, for those players to gain that confidence and that mentality. You get on a winning run and suddenly you feel a little invincible. You don't think you're going to lose the next game. But it is an attitude of mind as well. And I think he's the right man to try and instill that attitude.
Cool. Cheers, Lewis. I think Nigel at the back wants to ask a question as well. Nigel, unmute yourself and go for it.
Hi, Alan. We haven't touched on your England career yet, and bookended between your two golden boots of 89 and 91 was obviously Italia 90, which was a special time. You'd only just made your England debut, and the day after Anfield 89, Steve Bull made his debut for England up in Hampden. Steve Bull eventually took your place in that squad, and looking it up today, it was you, Tony Adams, Rocky, who missed out, went from the 26-man squad to the 22. I mean, was that a major gutting moment, knowing that World Cups only come once every 4 years and England don't qualify every time? Or was it something you were able to say, my league club career is going well, so, you know, England's a nice thing to have on top?
I was devastated. I was absolutely gutted. We were in Singapore on an end-of-season little trip. And I remember George Graham saying to me, Rocky and Tony, Bobby Robson wants you back at Bisham Abbey, that he's getting a squad together and he's going to pare it down from 26 to 22. So we thought, wow, he's calling us back from the other side of the world. There's a decent chance we might be in this squad. And I'll never forget walking to breakfast with Tony. We were sharing a room and Bobby Robson kind of ambushed us in the corridor, and he said to Tony, can I have a word? And he actually explained face to face to Tony why he wasn't in his squad. And Tony came into breakfast and said, I'm not going. And it was only when the old flip chart came out that me and Rocky discovered we weren't going either. And we've left the hotel that day just so upset, and even more upset when it turned into the World Cup that it did. And I know Bobby Robson in his autobiography said he picked Steve Bull's goals that year ahead of my lack of them. I don't know. I've got 14 that year or something. And Arsenal as a team, we didn't play very well. We didn't kick on from 89. But Bully was in the second tier, so I felt hard done by. I remember watching that semi-final against Germany. Lee Dixon and his family came on holiday with us. We went to Florida, and we were down at the pool, and I said to Dicko, well, the semi-final's kicking off in 10 minutes. Let's go up to the room and watch it. So we both watched it together and came back down, you know, gutted again, really, that England had been eliminated. But I'd have loved to have gone to that World Cup, even if I hadn't have kicked a ball. I'd have loved to have been part of it, but it wasn't to be, unfortunately.
Thanks, Echo.
Fair enough. Thanks. Alan, I just want to sort of change the subject slightly. And obviously the Black Lives Matter protests have been going on. There's obviously at Arsenal, you know, there was that really powerful picture, and I think there's been a question from John Blair on this as well. So John, we plan to cover it, so I'll cover your question in this as well. But obviously the players may go on one knee and stuff like that. I know from Arsenal that the players have been really, really passionate about this. So they feel really, really strongly. So I guess there's kind of two questions in this. One's from kind of John around, have the kind of Sky Sports team been sort of briefing on how they'll handle it, what they'll say, what they'll, you know, kind of, you might have mentioned it in your briefings. And I guess, and the second point is, I mean, yeah, there was a really powerful quote from Will Smith about 2 weeks ago when he said, you know, racism isn't a new thing, it's just being filmed.
which I thought was really powerful. And obviously, you've mentioned a few of your teammates like Wrighty, Rocky, Michael Thomas, and stuff like that. So, I mean, how was it for you when, you obviously would have seen stuff, you certainly, when you were playing away, you would have heard stuff. How hard was it, to kind of support your teammates when you potentially do understand, don't understand, but like all that kind of time, how was that? And then obviously the Sky thing for Wednesday night and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, the lads in my era kind of would just try and shrug it off. I'm sure inside it hurt a great deal more than they tended to show. We had some strong characters. No matter how strong your character, that's going to hurt. I mean, I didn't hear a great deal. Maybe it was just when maybe Rocky went over to take a throw in or something. You might hear something shouted. In my experience, it didn't happen all that often. But it has been around forever, and it's just it shocked me really when it came back. There was that incident at Man City and then at Chelsea, and I hadn't really seen that. For a long time, and you're just hoping that it was getting eradicated to a certain extent. And now, obviously, we've got the situation we have. We've spoken about it. We had a Zoom call on Sunday, as a Sky one, which was joined by Troy Townsend, who spoke brilliantly to us all. And yeah, it's getting the right tone, isn't it? And doing something about it, trying to take positive action as a company, which Sky will try to do, rather than just paying it lip service. Oh, there we go, my video's back. Rather than just paying it lip service, it's not an easy fix by any means, is it? It's a long-term thing. There's going to be a 20-minute discussion at the top of the show on Wednesday about it.
Okay.
So yeah, we're all very aware, and I just hope we can. It does seem like a watershed moment, and I hope it is. And when now we start heading in the right direction.
Would you have was there ever any talk about maybe walkouts or anything like that when you were playing, or was it kind of, as you said, did players kind of just ignore it? Because maybe that was the tactic then, let's just ignore it, whereas maybe now people are talking about it a bit more.
Yeah, no, there wasn't any talk about walkouts, not like the England team in Bulgaria the other day. We never heard anything to that extent, really. So it was an individual thing that sometimes players just had to try and cope with. But I don't remember the manager even saying too much about it. Obviously, you had those incidences with banana phone at John Barnes and that. But from memory, they seem like isolated incidents. But it's a lot more deep rooted than that. And we've got to do something about it. Starting from now.
Do you still talk to kind of your ex-players? I mean, I'm thinking about someone like Wrighty, who's obviously been very vocal about it, and his obviously cousin was in. There was a show last week on the BBC, Sitting in Limbo, that was in, and Wrighty's been tweeting a lot about it, and he's also shown examples of messages he's got, which are just, you look at them and you just think, are people really getting these? They're really, really kind of not nice. I mean, is it something you've talked about with kind of friends and ex-pros like that, or is it just haven't had the opportunity?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because you mix with a certain sort of people, so you almost forget that there are people out there that think like that and speak like that. The kind of abuse that Wrighty and other players have got, and as a white man, I wouldn't know what it's like, how it feels. So yeah, I mean, we had Rocky, we had Mickey Thomas, didn't we? Gus Caesar, Paul Davis. And Arsene Wenger said recently, didn't he? He said, the dressing room is such an equal place where you're all judged on merit, and colour, nationality, passports just don't come into it. And footballers were just brought up to think that way, really. And that's why it's so shocking when not everybody feels the same, really.
Yeah, well, let's just hope this has been a watershed moment. You know, someone from a kind of ethnic minority background as well. There's lots of stuff I've seen, so I think hopefully this will help. And you know, personally, I'm heavily proud of the players who are really sort of wanting to make a stand, which I think is kind of really positive. So just want to kind of end on sort of that note, but also just quickly talk about obviously Headway, and you're a patron of Headway. That's where we'll be obviously donating a little bit of money, just as a sort of thank you to you for joining us. But tell us a little bit about that and tell us how you kind of got involved in that.
Yeah, I'd done a couple of things for them over the years. Just attended a couple of lunches, really, nothing too much. But the chief exec at Headway Hertfordshire then asked me to become a patron. I live in Hertfordshire. And it appealed. Obviously, there's a link with football, isn't there, and brain injury. Yeah. So it's been quite topical over the last year or so. The connection with heading and all the rest of it. So I just thought it was quite an appropriate charity to get involved in, and I think there's going to be a lot more, to come out about heading and the effects of it. Yeah. Long term in footballers, where that's going to lead us, I don't know. Kids teams aren't heading it so much in training, and the game will change, but it'd be a shame if heading was taken off the agenda completely. There's nothing better than seeing somebody rising at the far post and whacking one in with the head, is there? But I think training wise, coaches won't put on the drills that we used to, serving balls up to centre halves who would try and get height and distance, with their headers, clearing headers, that kind of thing. But Headway, it does great work, and they have to raise millions a year in order to look after the people they want to look after. So I'm proud to be a part of that.
Good stuff, and obviously well done and all that. And just finally, we had, obviously after the last event was postponed in March, you were obviously going to attend in March just before the lockdown. We did have people kind of trying to buy your book and stuff because they obviously were excited about coming and meeting you and getting it signed and stuff. And we'll certainly get you to a physical event when we're allowed. But obviously your book's still available. Still in all bookstores and all that, people can still buy them.
Yeah, it's still, I think so. Last time I looked, Heads Up.
Still available, Heads Up, yeah.
Obviously, online as well, you can buy it. No, I enjoyed writing it, just to look back at my career, my life, really. So it was quite an illuminating exercise, and I think Arsenal fans will enjoy it. It touches on all the big moments and some not so happy moments for me as well. So I try to be balanced in it. Yeah,
and obviously you kind of wrote it yourself. And I mean, how long did it take? And that must have been a bit of a challenge. Quite talented, really. Played for Arsenal, wrote a book yourself.
Well, I wrote for the Daily Telegraph for 20 years. Not long after coming out of the game, they asked me to write a column, and I've been to European Championships and World Cups for them. So I thought, well, I'm not going to ask a ghostwriter to do it. It'd be silly. So, and I think it does make it a little bit more authentic. So, I enjoyed it. It took me about a year or so. And it's a lovely keepsake, for the family, for my children to have a kind of documentation of my playing career. And when you look back, you just feel very proud that you've achieved what you have. Well, privilege, really. I say at the end of the book, to have earned a living out of professional football, you are so lucky, so privileged. You might experience down times, but you're earning a living playing the game that you love. So nobody should ever forget that. And as I said earlier, I was just so lucky that I joined Arsenal at the beginning of something special. And better players than me haven't won anything near as many trophies. So I've been fortunate.
So you can say what you want, Smudge. You're a legend to us, and you always will be. So, on that note, thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate it. I think we're all ready for the football to start again. We're all excited and rearing to go, and I guess you are too. So obviously, good luck for the next kind of, was it 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks? Your first game's on what, Friday, you said?
on Sky?
Yeah, Norwich, Southampton, so a bit of a relegation clash. Then I've got West Ham on the Saturday and Aston Villa, Chelsea on the Sunday. So it's a busy old start, but it'll be good. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking an evening out to talk to us on one of your last 3 evenings before it all starts. So, Smudge, stay safe. All our attendees, thank you for attending. And obviously, thank you generally for the support. I mean, this is the 6th event. We've still got over 100 people watching even now. So thank you very much. As I said, this will be our last one. We want you to all enjoy the football. And there's a lot of it, which is great. And we'll be back. We'll be back at the end of the season for some sort of event or other, and we'll get someone looped in. So stay safe, everyone. Enjoy the football. And, of course, up the Arsenal. Thank you.